Good afternoon. Welcome to the Money Smart for Small Business series. We're here at the Bioscience Center today with our wonderful sponsor, New Mexico Bank and Trust, and Heather Johnson, who is a vice president at the bank and teaches all of our curriculum. Today's topic is risk management for small business. Main topic in the news these days with all the natural disasters, so lots of things to talk about, I'm sure. You can join us next month, and our topic will be insurance. So take it away.
Okay, thank you. So risk management covers a lot of different topics: internal risk, external risk, and really today we're going to be working out ways to think about your particular business and the risks that are involved. So we're really going to scare you, and then we're going to come up with ways to have solutions for all those different risks. You guys know the rules and everything. So, as I mentioned, our objectives today are to identify the most common risks that are associated with your particular business, identify external and internal factors that might play into those risks, and identify solutions which may cause risks for small businesses. And some of these things, when you think about risk, are negative, but a lot of it can actually be positive, but there's still risks associated with it. For instance, if a competitor goes out of business, that might be good for your business because you'll get more, but then how do you manage that growth and increase in sudden sales and demand that you weren't anticipating? So both positive and negative risks to be thinking about. We're also going to look at common warning signs that might be in a business, and then ways to implement and monitor the risks that are happening within your business and creating a management plan for that. A lot of businesses have a business continuity plan, which discusses ways to keep your business running in the event of a natural disaster like a hurricane, or even something like a pandemic, like when bird flu was the big topic of conversation. What do you do if all of your employees are out sick on the same day? So is there anything in particular today you guys want to know about risk management?
Well, can you hit on some more positive? Well, what other positive, because my mind's just not going there. What other positive things could happen that would be a risk?
Mostly growth is the biggest risk. Unanticipated huge growth is a big drain on cash flow. And businesses that suddenly have huge growth are calling their banker wanting to know how they can get money because they don't have the sources to continue to feed the machine.
Okay.
So sadly, it can cause your business to go out even though it's a good thing.
Okay. I've heard that, but in the marrying business, I can't imagine having that problem, but you know, who knows?
Right, you suddenly have too many orders and perhaps you didn't order the right widget to put all of those orders together, so now everything's in back stock, and then your customers get angry, and then it's kind of a downward spiral.
And they quit buying.
And then they quit buying. Maybe in your case as a marrying minister, you overbook without realizing it.
I never thought of that.
Because you're not expecting to have business, so then maybe you don't keep track of things as well as you think, and then you start overbooking and people get mad. And
yeah, that would be highly dangerous.
Right?
Yeah. You're messing with somebody's life. Okay.
So the first step is identifying areas of threat to the business, and then assessing what you think would be the primary risk or ways to mitigate it, and then how you can continue to grow and keep your business in existence despite the risks and threats. So we've already talked about our first discussion point, which is what are some positive situations that can create risk? Does anybody else have anything they want to add to what could be a good thing to your business that could create risk?
Oh boy, wouldn't it be awesome if I got so popular with couples that I was way too busy?
We want that to happen.
Yes.
Another thing that could change is the laws that could increase the potential business to your particular segment. I talked with a tax accountant about if they changed the tax code and made it easier, and the potential, I mean, that would drastically change the accounting business and all of those accountants that rely on tax preparation every year as a large source of income.
Yeah.
That's an external threat and factor that they can't.
They have no control.
Right. So, internal risks. These ones are potentially the ones you can handle the most and be the most prepared for. Some big ones. Death of an owner or a key employee. SBA, on a lot of times when they're lending money, require key man insurance for any key employee that could affect the business if something were to happen. Even if you aren't getting an SBA loan, it's important to get insurance as an owner so that your business can keep going, or whoever is left behind has the funds to take care of the business after the fact. Illness, short-term, long-term, or indefinite. Any of those things could be a factor, and if you are the only person running your business and you get appendicitis, what are you going to do? If you get appendicitis, how are you going to marry those couples?
Exactly. I need to have somebody that can be my backup and support.
Mm-hmm. So who's that person, and how do you get in touch with them if something happens?
Well, here I haven't met anybody. I've asked around a little bit. I don't get out enough to ask a lot, but I do know someone who has married someone before, and he's a young man and he does not want to do that anymore. So that was my conversation with him, was about would you be my backup
if something were to happen.
Yeah, and so till I meet somebody in the industry that is willing to work with me, I don't have an answer for that.
And you provide that same service potentially for them,
Right.
or you're a partner in that.
Even though they're separate from me,
Right.
help each other out. Yeah.
So there's insurance you can get, health insurance, finding somebody who's your backup, having a manager that you train. I'm a big proponent of cross-training. I think all employees should be able to do just about everything in a business that's possible. Employees like it. It's good for their morale because they like learning new things, and it's great for your business because you don't have to worry as much. If the one person who can do X doesn't show up that day, what are you going to do? They have to be able to do X and Y, so that if they don't show up because they have appendicitis, you're okay. Other human risks. These ones are great. Theft and fraud. How can you prevent theft and fraud in your business? It could be product and inventory theft. Maybe you have something going out the back door that you don't know about. So ways to mitigate that would be regular inventory by a third person or yourself, that you're doing the inventory regularly. Timesheet fraud, where people are saying that they're there, but they're not really. How do you monitor that? Accounting and cash fraud. Your cash deposits aren't making it to the bank. That's always a fun one. So how do you watch that and make sure that there's something that you're doing? Maybe you make 2 people go to the bank to take the cash deposit. Maybe you do it yourself. Checking your bank statements regularly and reconciling those so you know if things aren't getting where they're supposed to be. So always have a check and then a measure to make sure things are happening. In bookkeeping, how do you educate your owners? You're doing the books, but then how do you educate your owners to look over your shoulder for that?
Just basically reviewing the financial statements, monthly reconciliations, things like that. It's good for them to have some kind of review and idea of what's going on.
Right? Not just take your word for it. And it protects you as much as them, because you don't want them to come out and say, hey, Misty, this is wrong.
Right.
So you need
That
to
would be a
protect
good workshop
yourself.
for you to develop and teach, Miss.
Yeah.
That would be awesome. Do you have clients that don't have any interest in knowing this?
I do, but I still generally send them things to review, whether they do it or not. I can't say, but at least I give them the opportunity. So.
Right. But that's a risk for you as a bookkeeper.
Yep.
Low morale. I thought this was an interesting one as I was going through. I hadn't really thought about this, but it's true, and it is a risk. Unhappy employees cost money through negligence or through willful acts. I think of negligence probably most. If they don't care, then they're not going to care
Right.
about your business. So the example provided is an employee who forgets to reorder inventory is a risk to sales, because then you have back orders and you have unhappy customers because you don't have the product on hand that they want. And the employee probably doesn't care. So keeping your employees happy and how to manage that so they have an invested interest in your business. Other things to consider: equipment breakdowns. New equipment integration, worn or old equipment, and damage to vehicles. So if a vehicle is an important part of your business because you need to get out to marry people, how are you going to mitigate that risk if your car breaks down? What are some backup plans? With Kendra, if her horse is sick, how is she going to mitigate that risk if somebody shows up for a class and the horse is out of commission?
Right.
There's insurance. There's also, keeping up with things along the way. Maybe your plan with your vehicles is to regularly schedule your 3,000-mile oil and filter change and that sort of thing. Those are ways to mitigate against that too. Lisa probably knows the most about this one. Equipment and information technology, lack of backup or recovery system, updates and repairs, power and connectivity, and lack of administrative controls. If you're not keeping your technology up to date, you're more likely to get a virus or malware, correct?
True. Absolutely.
I know somebody whose phone line was disconnected because she was having repairs done. And how did she then take orders over the phone if she didn't have a phone line? So how can you mitigate against something like that? I know with construction happening outside businesses too, things can happen that you're not anticipating. So how can you think about those risks to keep your business going if something happens out on the street?
Even things as simple as not training your employees on how to eliminate the possibility of getting a virus on their computers, which could affect the whole company. It's really important.
Right. Not letting your employees check email at work so that if they get a virus, it doesn't upset the whole thing. Other internal risks would include physical plant repairs, breaks in lines or utilities, routine maintenance, always keeping things up to date. And then also work-related injuries. How can you manage if somebody is hurt on the job? What are ways to mitigate that? And where's your first aid kit? Do your employees know how to use it if something comes up? Damage to others property by employees if they do something to the next door neighbor. And then damage to your property by others. This is probably a big thing in Albuquerque right now as business owners are facing a lot of vandalism. How can you mitigate that? Is it more lighting, cameras, security systems? What are some things you can do? I think the bottom line is you can't prevent everything from happening to your small business, but maybe there's some simple things you can do that would at least help. So then we start looking at other things. Cash flow changes. This is probably one of the biggest things, and it comes up again as a warning sign to your business. If you're checking your account always and checks are always bouncing, there's a big issue. I've seen this at banks as a teller on the front line when somebody's coming in and regularly having overdraft problems. It's usually a red flag about the business and that something's going on. So watching your cash flow, watching your bank account to make sure how things are going, that's a big red flag or a warning sign that maybe something's going on. But then how can you mitigate that? Maybe you need to get a new line of credit that increases it. Maybe you need to talk with your vendors about extending payment terms. Maybe you have a good relationship with them that you can do some of those things and put off paying for a little while longer to get yourself back on your feet. And the other thing too is even if you are looking at a new line of credit, there are costs and risks associated with that. There's closing costs and things of that nature. So important to look at everything when you're making these decisions. What other internal risks and controls can you think of as a business owner?
Well, for me, and I think I've mentioned this before, not that it's like a major fear, but if I'm going to do a pop-up wedding for someone and they pick the top of a hill somewhere, the one in Tomei with the crosses or something, and I'm all alone climbing that hill and coming back down, and somebody runs up and wants to do something, I don't know how. I'm still trying to figure out ways I can protect myself out in aloneness in that situation.
Well, initially maybe you don't book weddings until you find a backup person that can be with you. Take a photographer with you as part of your service, maybe, saying, I'm the minister and here's my photographer, and you all both go together.
Buy yourself a taser.
Buy yourself a taser. Pepper spray.
Yeah, that's been mentioned by people who sell that here in town for women.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, something defense.
Yeah.
Damsel in defense.
I would always take my own car.
Yeah.
Self-defense class.
Okay.
What about you for computer programming? What are some internal risks you think might happen if
Beyond the employee who's not trained on how to protect themselves.
Yes.
For the clients, I had a client get ransomware once, so that's scary. You try to educate them, but sometimes they get the smartest people.
Mm-hmm.
Off-site backups are really important, so that if something does happen to your data, you can recover. Even if it's in the cloud.
Right.
More importantly, if it's in the cloud.
Anything for you, Misty?
Well, and finance there always is, but
There's always, right?
probably just that, I guess an internal risk that you can have too many hands in the pot too,
Mm.
and too many people working on the same thing, and things get messed up or unbalanced, or an entry gets made wrong, or so I've seen that too, where especially when I do have clients that are more hands-on, they'll go in and change something, but then they'll tell me to do something, so it's either double posted or so
Yeah.
that's a big risk that we have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want enough people to watch and make sure they know what's going on, but too many people can
Yeah.
mess everything up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So external risks, things that aren't quite in your control or easy to mitigate, but still things that are important to think about. So competition, we kind of talked about this one a little bit. Market changes that can cause your business to change. I think this is a big one you see on a national scale. We went from small bookstores to big bookstores to Amazon, and we've watched them all slowly go out of business along the way. Some small bookstores have managed to keep up, others haven't. So how do you keep up with that growing trend and changing your business? Loss of clients or customers because of that. Loss of employees. A new shiny company comes in that's willing to pay more money than you are for whatever reason, and you're going to lose your key employee. So are you willing to pay a little bit more? How are you going to keep your employees with you when a competitor comes into town? A decrease in sales or fluctuating markets. Are you able, if that new competitor comes in, do you have a plan that as sales decrease, you're able to mitigate that? Typically, it's reacting too slow that gets businesses in trouble. If they react pretty quickly, a lot of times, not always, they can stay on their feet, but if you react too slow, you're not going to be able to make it. Increase in vendor costs. If you are a business that relies on one vendor to supply everything to you, that is a big risk to your business. If you are only purchasing from one person and they decide to increase prices, what are you going to do? how can you mitigate that? Maybe you have 2 vendors. Maybe you start talking to other people so that if that price increase happens, you already have something going on. Oil and gasoline price increases. This has always been a big issue for businesses. And fixed cost changes. Maybe your rent goes up because for whatever reason. Utilities, all of those types of things. Keeping track of those costs that suddenly increase. So how can you mitigate against that, and how can you watch that or look for those warning signs through your books to make sure that you're able to keep up with that?
So is that something you would catch in the bookkeeping of their books?
If the prices go up,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
And then,
you should have a budget in mind and know what you have to spend and what you don't.
every time you go to the gas pump, we know the price
Right,
of gas went up, but
exactly.
still,
Mm-hmm.
you have to rebudget and add in more for that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's down to budgeting.
And keeping up with that on a monthly basis to know, last month I spent way more on inventory. Is that because the cost went up, or is it because I'm buying more?
Okay.
And if I'm buying more, am I getting more sales, or was somebody not paying attention? Or maybe it's because I had to buy at the last minute and expedite, and now my fuel charge is more than I anticipated because I didn't order on time. So those are risks that you can watch.
Okay. But I never thought about before.
Other things, laws, we talked about a little bit. Weather, this is a big thing right now. How do you have a business continuity plan if your business is to shut down for a short period of time because of something happens? Even here where we don't have weather, maybe there's a water main break and your business is flooded. What are you gonna do? The electricity for whatever reason goes out in your business for 3 days. What are you gonna do? Do you have a backup generator? There is insurance that you can purchase for loss of business revenue. Maybe that's something you want to investigate. How can you protect on a flood? These are things to think about. Your community changes. The needs, age group, spending habits, and income of the population change. If you're in something that's a very price-sensitive business and the economy in your city goes down and your discretionary spend, what are you going to do to mitigate that? Maybe you need to go online and find customers at other places where discretionary money isn't as bad. Maybe you need to move your business. Maybe you need to move to a different neighborhood where things are different. You start in one location and realize it's not the best fit for your business. So you own a steakhouse. A tainted meat scare in your area changes demand. How do you control this? What are your thoughts?
Well, remember what happened to Oprah years ago, something about don't eat beef or something, and she got sued for
Really?
it?
In the beef industry?
Yeah. Oh, you didn't know that?
I don't
Oh,
remember.
that's how Dr. Phil came to be.
Really?
He helped her on the sidelines from the psychological aspect of picking their jury and how to proceed with the court and everything. But people, because she said, I don't know that there was something wrong with beef, or was it just I'm dieting, don't eat beef, or don't eat Burger King or something, and people stopped, and the
crazy.
Texas cattlemen came together, as they always do, and threw her into the lion's den. It was huge for months, and it comes up every so often. So something major like that, she was sued, but I think she got out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing that one person can have that much influence
Influence,
and control
yeah.
on an industry. It's kind of scary.
So there you go. There's a situation where people quit eating beef for, doesn't matter, a day. That would kill beef across the United States. That would hurt everybody for a day.
So
So how do they I don't
So
know.
you mentioned they joined together, and that's
Yes.
what they say here is join with other restaurants in advertising campaign on the safety of your particular beef, or launch one of your own. Make sure you have a cushion in your budget. Contact the Chamber of Commerce to address the issue publicly, or contact the news media for an interview about your particular restaurant, to sort of mitigate these.
Look at all the restaurants on Central.
Mhm.
Whose business has been affected. Yeah, I bet many of them weren't prepared.
For the art project?
Mhm.
Well, did the city give anybody notice of that starting, and they might,
Mhm.
They had notice.
but they just didn't think about it, or?
Some of them did come together, like the West Downtown area created their own little marketing group.
Yeah, that was cool.
And so now it's West Downtown. And
East Downtown got together and fought for the changes they wanted,
mhm.
or the things they wanted to ensure happened in their area. And they were able to get, some additional things during the construction. It didn't really help the ability to get into the restaurants per se, but they got some extra curbs and parking spaces. And
Good. So they were able to come together. So I think working with the media, maybe a PR person to help your business if you can do that, but just trying to get the word out about why people shouldn't be concerned of your particular restaurant when there's a big scare like that. So, other things that can be a risk. Personal conflicts, family obligation, illnesses, or deaths. These can be sort of a mental drain. If the business owner has a family member who passes away, maybe a parent, that they're just not able to cope or focus on the business for a period of time. What do they do to mitigate that? Hopefully there's a key manager in place who can run things while you take care of it. But think about putting that in place prior to the event happening. Be proactive rather than reactive. That's what risk management's all about. How can you be proactive to these rather than reactive after the fact? Because when you're in the middle of it, you won't be thinking clearly. Events of disaster that affect your home, community involvement. Nick was talking about this beforehand. Insurance to cover you if you are involved in the community, but also how much time does that community involvement take away from you being at your business? It's a great place to be seen. It's a great place to give back, but what is the cost to your business that you're not there? And have insurance. And then this is one too that I think is really important, and one I need to think about is complacency. Everything's moving along just fine. So what could possibly go wrong? Well, your employees could start becoming complacent too and think that they can't ever do anything wrong. Everything's always going to be okay. They're a smooth-oiled machine. So how can you keep that interest going? How can you make sure you keep people thinking about growth and things? If you're kind of happy where you're at, there's still an opportunity out there to continue to grow. So not to let your business become complacent, even if it's doing well. So what would be required for your business to continue operations if something were to happen? I know in banking I had to do a business continuity plan, and it was, if 2/3 of your employees are out sick, what are you going to do? And so part of it, find employees from other locations that might be able to come in. Maybe consolidate locations where we would have to close one and work at a different one. But that's particular to banking. What are some other things? If something were to happen, that would be absolutely necessary for your business to be required. I'm guessing for you, some sort of backup situation, generators, backup data for it to keep running.
We don't store data or anything locally or on servers for clients, so that's not an issue. I think more about FatPipe and the Bioscience Center and what would happen if something happened to Stu.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's the driver and the core to making all of that happen, and So there's lots at risk there.
Hopefully you guys will talk about it or come up with a plan.
Yeah.
Boy, I don't know, in my case, a lot of what we're hearing kind of sounds like it doesn't pertain to me,
Mm-hmm.
but I could be really stupid.
Well, I mean, if something were to happen to you personally, how do you maintain those appointments?
Yeah, if I don't have a backup, I'd be
And if you don't have a car,
Mm-hmm.
and if you don't want to upset your bride and groom,
Yeah, it's the last thing you want to do.
yeah.
Yeah, I'll just have to keep looking for somebody that'll work with me and we can back each other up.
Mm-hmm. And sort of prioritizing too, I think, what are the biggest risks, and then going through sort of, you can't mitigate everything, but maybe start with the most important thing that you see in your particular business,
Yeah.
and start with that,
I'm
and come
ready
up with a
to
plan.
really sit and do some heavy brainstorming on this, because I hadn't thought about it. I'm thinking, well, I'm just one person who marries people,
Mm-hmm.
big whoop. So
You're
maybe
the key man.
Yeah, you are the man.
So maybe I need to think a little bigger.
So, things to put in place: a written business plan. If something were to happen, put it in place so that you have it, so that when you aren't thinking clearly, you can go back and refer to it. And it should be something that changes. Business plans should always be changing. Don't just write it and then put it in the safe and say, oh, it's done. Should always be changing because things change. Outside sources to assist you in identifying. Maybe you want to talk with a lawyer. Maybe you want to talk with an insurance agent. Maybe you want to talk with somebody else in your same field. So to ask them what they do in the event of emergency and how they handle these particular situations. And coming up with that business continuity plan to keep your business going. So how do you know if there's something wrong? The warning signs. Excessive debt in relation to the owner's equity. Well, how do you know that? So first you need to determine what the liabilities are, or the debt, short-term and long-term. Then you divide that by how much equity you have in your business, or kind of what's left over on your balance sheet. And generally a good rule of thumb is 40 to 50%. If you're over that, you're pretty high leveraged and should start considering ways to pay off that debt, to get out of that. Reliance on a small number of customers, products, or vendors. If you only have one customer that you supply, and even if it's a great customer and something happens to them, what are you going to do?
And oddly enough, that's what I wrote down off that list, because I need to share that with somebody who has that thought process.
I know when the construction boom was happening, a lot of contractors only did commercial, or they only did residential, or they only did this. And then after all the dust settled, the ones that survived suddenly did a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and a little bit of over here. So they weren't just all focused on one thing. And how do you get your business so that it can suddenly accommodate all of those different things? And again, if you have one vendor that you're purchasing from, what if that vendor goes up? What if they go out of business? How are you going to get your supplies? So talking to other vendors and determining who else can supply that in your particular line of work. We talked about this, cash flow problems. It's important. The very basic calculation of your cash flow starts with your business's cash balance at the beginning of the month and at the end of the month. If your cash balance went down at the end of the month from the beginning of the month, you're spending more cash than you're bringing in. So there's a lot of legitimate reasons that can be happening, and maybe it's not a concern, but if it happens all the time, all of a sudden you're not going to have any cash in your bank account, and what are you going to do? So it's an easy way to monitor, and bank statements even provide you up at the top, the very first little box says beginning balance, cash in, cash out, ending balance. So you know right away if you're spending more than you're making. Irregularities in accounting, bank, or time card records. If you start seeing things are weird, you know, if your payroll suddenly went from $5,000 each week to $7,000, why did that happen? Could be a very good reason, but you should find out.
Yeah.
If your bank account, if you were positive every single month and now you're negative, well, why? Irregularities in a computer system administrative effort. Always monitoring who has access to what. Did something change? Do you have somebody who's a manager that has access to these parts but not these parts? But then the next time you go in and look and all of a sudden they have access to everything? Well, why did that happen and how can you change it? And do you need to change it? And also, if you have somebody who's no longer employed with you, don't leave them on the computer system. Take them off. Make sure that they don't have access. And then if you have a lot of employees who are leaving you, that might be a big warning flag, and find out why. And is it a result of poor hiring decisions, poor training, or is it the work environment? Most likely a combination of all three. So, how do you identify for all of these risks? How do you identify the needs in your business continuity plan? Identifying needs for potential or planned growth, discussing risks with managers, and communicating that risk. So, everybody loves an acronyms. SWOT. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Remember that some risks can also be opportunities. Other resources. Small Business Administration. They can help you. Their website has a lot of information on it. An audit firm or a CPA would help. Even a bookkeeper can help you. Your banker or commercial lender can help you. A risk insurance provider, and an internet source. Maybe, like I said, finding out other companies that are similar to yours, or maybe there's an association. Is there an association of marriage ministers?
Not that I have found. I've found that, like any town, those who are available to do that, pay to advertise with the wedding magazines
Mm-hmm.
and can get on their websites.
Mhm.
Says, click here to find someone and use this code and stuff.
Yeah.
But I've asked around, just like in LA, I kept trying to get some of the people involved in the wedding industry, just short of David Tatera for some reason. Can't talk to him.
Hmm.
Thinks he's all that in a bag of chips, apparently. They don't, there's no meetups for anyone in the business,
Hmm.
in the event or hospitality business. They don't gather together, they don't uplift each other, talk, or anything. I can't find anything anywhere.
Hmm.
Maybe you'll have to start a group.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking.
Well, I'm hoping to start a meetup in that sometime soon, but
Yeah.
yeah, so far I actually know one woman who has started doing this
Mhm.
while I was in LA. I just heard about her and that she's doing this. So everybody says, "Oh, you should call Marion." I call Marion and she doesn't want to answer back.
Hmm.
Same thing in LA. Go
Yeah.
to all the bridal shows and things and talk to these wonderful wedding planners, event planners. If they think you're going to be a customer right in front of their face, they'll fall over everybody to get to you. But to ask them questions, they just push me aside.
Hmm.
I just wanted to get together, and you're telling me that not one of you out of, in LA, the thousands, and here, the 10 or 12, you can't spare an hour for coffee together?
Yeah.
So, I'm going to keep at it, and I will try to find a place where we can gather and do it on the cheap and see what happens.
Okay. So how do you prioritize? How much is this going to affect your potential earnings and cash flow? Is it going to, if something were to happen, is it going to seriously impact your business, or is it just going to make things uncomfortable for a little bit, but you'll get through it? Manage the ones that are going to put a serious dent in your business before the ones that you'll be difficult, but you can get through. How is it going to impact the business for future growth? Is it going to be a lot, a little? Costs related to the risk should it occur. Something like water damage. If a business is flooded, it can be cleaned up, reopened, and continue. But what is the cost of the cleanup? What is the cost of the lost business while you're closed? All of those types of things. What would change in your business as a result? If your business was flooded, would you continue to rent there? Would you move to a different location? And weighing costs versus the benefits of the control. Risk mitigant. You can buy all types of insurance. You can buy all kinds of things to help you do this, but is that cost worth what you're getting in return? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Well, I hope you all know why this is important, but in case you don't, minimizing and controlling the effects of risk can improve and maintain business cash flow. It's all about the cash flow. The continuity of cash flow creates stability for an organization and helps credit relationships remain intact while building additional credit. So what does this all mean? It means your business will continue. The longevity of a company will mean greater stability. Creditors will see this stability and good cash flow reflected in the financials of the company. The rewards of risk management are all linked together. Good cash flow leads to stability, which leads to good credit, which leads to longevity. Bankers do look at, did you survive a downturn in the market, or how did you get through your business being flooded? Those types of situations when analyzing credit. Not always, but it is important to look at and know how the business managed difficult times as well as the good times. So what should you do? A written business plan should not only include a list of possible risks, but also include the controls and plans to manage the risk. Keeping your business plan current by readdressing changes in costs and assessing new risks as things change. Equipment and vendors. Inclusion in a written business plan. You should just plan on the fact that your equipment at some point is going to break down. It's just a fact of life. Your car is going to break down. And it's never at a convenient moment. Never. So what is your plan for that if it happens? Readdress, monitor, and update the business plan periodically. Insure equipment and use service plans. Maybe you purchase a service plan for that equipment so that you know when it breaks down, somebody will be there within 24 hours. Know your vendors, suppliers, and backup relationships. Know what their backup plan is too, perhaps. If you're expecting a delivery and you want to know and you need it every Wednesday, well, what's their contingency plan if something happens and they can't get it to you by Wednesday? Business continuity. Are you going to keep your business in the same location if something should happen? What steps are you going to take if you have to move for short-term or for long-term? Do you need to establish a manual system if you can't accept credit cards and your computer systems are down? What's that backup plan? Do you have forms and a file somewhere that you keep that if somebody wants to come in and order something, you can pull it out and fill it out the old-fashioned way? Important.
You do that?
What?
So credit card companies still take a handwritten or manual receipt?
Sometimes. The old knuckle breaker.
Yeah. I remember those.
Yeah. Usually what happens is you write it down and have them sign it, and then you key it in after the power comes back up. Most importantly, train your staff to know where those files are in the event the power goes out. So if you're not there, they know where the file of forms are and they can just pull them out. Backup operating systems. Whose job is it to call everybody? And make sure you have a list of contacts for everybody in the office. If you can't get to Bioscience Center, who's going to be the one who calls everybody to say, hey, don't come in today, building's on fire?
You guys got locked in once, not too long ago.
Who are you going to call if you get locked in?
Lisa said, we're locked in. Police won't let us leave. We're stuck here.
What happened? The doors just jammed?
No, there was a SWAT situation across the street and they wouldn't let anybody in or out.
They even
Okay.
blocked our gate and everything.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah.
Review contracts with vendors for provisions. Like I mentioned, if you need something always on time, what is their provision if they can't get it to you? And no systems provider for backup and contingency operational plans. Have a number somewhere for P&M if you need to let them know that the power is out. The water utility if there's a water main break and you don't have water. Those types of things. And let your staff all know where they are too so they can contact them. Information technology systems. Do not share your login information with anybody. Protect your system with firewalls. Institute levels of access so not everybody can get to everything. Perform reports so that you can see what's happening in your system. Sample transactions or use trial transactions to make sure everything's working. And then schedule and plan surprise audits to make sure everything's going. Audits are a big thing in banking. So, what are some things you can do if new competition opens up down the street? Do you just close your business and say, well, it was fun while it lasted?
No, but I have heavy belief that competition is good and there's enough to go around.
Oh. But there's some ways you can help protect yourself too. You can shop them. Go in and see how they handle the situations. Check their advertising. Where are they advertising? Who are they advertising with? What are their particular product lines? Maybe you have a niche that they aren't offering and you should advertise that more than they are.
Mm-hmm.
Pricing, are you in the market? And also maybe they're pricing themselves out of the market. Customer interaction. Again, when you shop them, you'll know if they're happy, pleasant people or if they're rude. And employee retention. This is both, are they going to steal your employees? And are they keeping their employees happy that they have a consistent business or do they have a lot of turnover? So those are things you can do. And then you can adjust your business strategy based on what you learn from all of these exercises. Maybe you need to change your pricing. Maybe you need to change your advertising. Maybe there's enough business to go around and you can work with them in some way and create a group or meetup that you all can work together to improve the industry rather than just being competitors. So, what is your most liquid asset and how can you protect it if something were to happen? It's your cash, right? Nothing more liquid than cash. So how can you protect it? Accounting and cash control, separation of duties. Your bookkeeper puts everything in. Maybe you balance and reconcile to the bank statement so that you know if what she's putting in is correct and then you're able to look over. Dual control of cash. At night, you have one person count it. Maybe the next morning, the next person comes in and counts it a second time to make sure it's all there. Levels of authority observed. If you have a manager who has lots of authority, make sure she's following it and make sure she isn't giving that authority to somebody else or he. Periodic audits. Check everything. Make sure everything's going well. Maybe you want to hire an external audit company or an external bookkeeper to come in and just look at everything. And surprise audits. Insured deposits, FDIC, $250,000 is the limit right now for your business to keep on hand and it to be insured by the FDIC. And then plan for reserves in your budget. Maybe you can start setting aside a little bit every month for those what-if situations. That's part of your risk management plan, is if you can set aside $100 and just Keep it for what if the business closes for 5 days? What am I gonna do? That $100 will start growing. Employee management. Maybe you need to do a background screening check before you hire your employees. Banks do that. A lot of other companies do it too, the labs. Having accurate and up-to-date job descriptions and duties so that the people who are applying know what they're actually getting themselves into. Communicate clear expectations with your staff. Cross-train everybody, like I mentioned. Identify temp agency that maybe you could call in the event somebody calls in sick. That's your backup plan, is a temp agency. And then giving periodic evaluations and feedback to your employees so they can know what they're doing good and what they're not doing so good. It's two-sided. And they can let you know too what you're doing good and what you're not doing so good as a boss. Manage by being present and walking around. I had a cleaning crew, and when their boss came and checked on them, even though it was only once a month, everything was spick and span and fabulous. When the boss quit checking on them, suddenly things weren't spick and span and fabulous. So just that one little thing.
When they get the job, they're gung-ho. Later, they're not so.
Yeah. So same thing in your business. If you're not there, well, the cat's away, the mouse will play. So being present makes a big deal. Auditing things, your payroll, your time cards, making sure those are accurate. Do you need to provide benefits and compensation for retaining your employees? And incentives to avoid injuries and damages. And maybe incentives to help grow the business. So incentives help. And then your own personal business work strategy so you don't burn out as an owner. Set your work hours, if you can. Plan a work with a balanced goal and set realistic goals. Make sure it's something you can obtain. Train and support staff or an assistant so that you don't have to do everything yourself. Include disability or death in your business plan. How are you going to manage that? What's your support system? Who can you turn to for help if something's going wrong? And what can you do at home or if something happens in your family that draws you away from the business? Keys to doing this are communication within your organization, routine assessment, checking out your trucks regularly if you have a delivery truck, checking out the maintenance of your equipment, knowing if something's about to fall apart before it actually falls apart, being proactive rather than reactive, being alert to changes in the community and laws, following what's happening up in Santa Fe to know if that's going to affect or impact your business. I think there's a mayoral race going on right now. And sick leave policy that's on the ballot that you should read. Awareness of news in the economy, both local and national, what's happening, very important. Utilizing lines of credit, but only when needed. And insuring against damages from weather or disaster, and backup utilities, your phone, your generators, your main sources of information. How are you going to back that up if there's a power outage? So lead by example. Ethical and honest behavior will begin with the management. So if you're not providing ethical, your employees are going to say, hey, he's not doing it, why should I? So when you start a business too, something to think about is how are you going to exit it? Because you want to exit it in your fashion, not have somebody exit it for you. So something to consider, and it might be different when you purchase it or start it than as you get closer to that. Is your exit strategy to turn it over to a family member? Is it to turn it over to an employee? Do you intend to sell it? Or are you just going to sell your inventory and close up shop? What is that exit strategy and how can you manage the risk of maintaining it? So mostly just plan and manage, and you will succeed. So 8 key points to remember. There's internal and external risks associated with a small business. You should begin assessing those risks all the time. And list all of those events or resources involved in the business that could impact continued operations and that ever important cash flow. Costs to insure and minimize risk should be weighed against the potential impact involved. Maybe you shouldn't buy really expensive insurance if you think it's only going to impact you $50. You're paying $100 a month for insurance for something that could cost you $50. Is it worth it? And the business continuity plan should be part of your overall business plan. Strategies to avoid risk can include communication, setting expectations, support systems, training staff, insurance assessment, and contingency plans. Your employees can also provide you risks too, because they might see things that you wouldn't realize is going on. So keeping that open two-door communication so that you can hear from them as well as coach them. So, do you guys have any last questions? You feel you've learned new?
This is a lot to really get into the meat of it and think about and come up with a good plan.
A good backup plan.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You need a business plan for everyday operations and then a business plan for the what ifs.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of what ifs, but you also need to sort of narrow them down and make it realistic. You can't cover everything, but what are the biggies? And as you own the business, the biggies will change, or you won't realize that it was a risk. Things happen.
Business ownership enlightens you in so many ways that you would never even fathom.
Good and bad.
Good and bad. Yeah.
That's all we have for today. If you guys would
This
fill
is
out.
awesome. Thank you. Yeah. Pretty crazy.
Bye.
Bye.